We're about to rank all the main protagonists and the antagonists that I consider important enough. In the background, we're about to be playing this video here. This is A Long Night in Xenoblade, relaxing music from 1, 2, and 3. It's by Omni ST. They worked hard on this. It's 3 hours, chat. That's enough time for me to get through half of this tier list. I think it was made by Mr. Misty down here. I'm guessing that's what that means. So shout out to them. There's also a few characters that are in here that don't really fit either category. I just wanted to talk about them, okay? But just know we're mainly covering the most important characters. Alright, so let's have a few disclaimers. Number 1, you might have noticed there's no Xenoblade X here. And I specifically chose this tier list because it excludes Xenoblade X. And the reason for that is not because I don't like Xenoblade X. If you guys know me, you know I love that game. It's more so the fact that it's not really a fair comparison. Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, they're all story-driven games. Xenoblade X is not a story-driven game. Second disclaimer is that there's going to be a lot of spoilers. So if you haven't played any of these games, I don't know what you're doing here. And the final disclaimer, number 3, how fitting, is that I've beaten Xenoblade 1 and 2 multiple times. I've only beaten Xenoblade 3 once. It hasn't even been a full month since it came out. I've only beaten it once. So what does that mean? That means it's kind of at a disadvantage. Whenever you have good storytelling and you revisit that story, there's always cool details you can pick out about the characters and just the overall story that you're just not going to perceive when you first play it or watch it. And I'm sure Xenoblade 3 has a lot of those, but I can't appreciate them because, well, I haven't experienced it again. Xenoblade 1 and 2, I'll be sure to mention those kind of details when I talk about certain characters, but just know that, like, that's not happening for Xenoblade 3. It's not possible. So it's kind of at a disadvantage, but I guess if you want to look at it in a positive way, it just came out, so maybe, like, I'm having some of that adrenaline, you know, some of that hype, since we beat it not too long ago. Maybe the novelty hasn't worn off, you know. With that being said, we're going to start with Xenoblade 1, of course. We're going to go from the antagonists first, because generally, Xenoblade antagonists are less interesting than the protagonists. I would never say that Xenoblade has amazing antagonists, so... and I think what perfectly exemplifies that is the greatest antagonist in Xenoblade history. The most despicable of the bunch. That's right, I'm talking about none other than Juju. Juju is the definition of a D-tier character, okay? I know it's a meme. Here's why. It's plain and simple, okay? Juju is your main motivation to get through the Colony 6 arc, okay? He's in trouble like 3 times. The first time he's being chased by Armus or Arduns. Second time he goes off on his own, stupidly, and you have to go save him. Third time he's kidnapped. So you have to save this dude 3 times. And that's your whole objective during the Colony 6 arc, to save Juju 3 times. Right? Now, even for a likable character, even for a character that's well written, 3 times in the span of 1 arc is a lot. I don't think that's controversial to say. That's a lot of times. But Juju isn't even likable to begin with. Okay? So it's even worse. Juju, as a character, doesn't really bring anything to the table. Juju just offers nothing. He's the main reason why I personally think that arc is the worst arc in the Xenoblade trilogy. And it's a shame to say, because that's like the first official arc when Shulk and Reyn depart on their revenge quest. First thing you do, you save Juju. It's just not, like, to me, you want to start off that quest very impactfully, give a strong impression, but instead, you get Juju. And Juju does not serve their purpose. He does not motivate you properly to want to save him. The only reason you want to save him is because it'd be kind of cruel if you didn't. It's not like this strong desire because you really like him. No, it's just like, well, I don't want to be an asshole, so let's go save him. I think the worst character in the Xenoblade trilogy, overall, honestly, is Gael'gar from Future Connected. He's actually worse than Juju. The only reason he's being mentioned is so I can shit on him, okay? He really doesn't deserve to be in this tier list. I just wanted to shit on him. So Gael'gar is one of the antagonists in Future Connected. This happens a lot in media. It's just kind of an annoying trope. He's like this character who looks evil. The way he speaks is evil. The way the cutscenes present him, he is evil. But for some reason, nobody in that world thinks he's evil. The most annoying form of dramatic irony. Dramatic irony, for those who don't know, is when the player or the spectator knows something about the story, but the characters don't yet. If you're gonna do that, at least make him an interesting villain. But Gael'gar is nothing. We've already established Gael'gar has nothing to hide, because he's obviously evil. But he literally has nothing to hide, because there's nothing to him. I think the main reason why I brought him to this tier list, besides shitting on him, is that I think he's indicative of just how I feel about Future Connected's story. Gameplay-wise, it's very fun. But story-wise, it just kind of feels like a hollow victory. Like, when you beat Gael'gar, you're not, like, cheering for joy. It's not satisfying. It's just like, it's like a mild, yay, we did it. That's how I felt when I beat Future Connected. It's like, okay, I see what this was supposed to achieve, but just a mild yay. I'm like, alright, it happens. Lorithia, I think she's effective in being, like, really despicable. Like, she's effective in making you want to defeat her. I will give her that, right? The reason why she's in C tier is because there's not, like, that much depth to her. There's not really much going on with her. But unlike Gael'gar, she is good at being a villain. You want to defeat her. Like, you can't wait to defeat her, in fact. You know, I think of, like, for example, she's, like, sitting on Callion's Telethia corpse. And then she, like, kisses Callion's corpse. It's, like, really weird, but also just, like, how dare you? Just, like, those kind of acts she has throughout the story. Of course, her wanting to assassinate Melia for, like, a racist reason, you know. It's things like that that make her an effective villain, effective at making you want to defeat her. That's why she's in C tier. I don't think this character is as good as they should have been, and that's Dickson. Dickson, the reason why Dickson is so memorable is because of the plot twist, right? When he shoots Shulk in the back and he revives Zanza. Amazing plot twist, phenomenal. Just changes your perspective on the whole story, right? That's awesome. But him as a character up till that point, you know, I'm not saying he was unlikable, but he was just pleasant to have around. Not really much outside of that. At least to me, like, I never looked at Dickson as like, yeah, man, Dickson's so cool. Hope he doesn't betray us. Like, I never thought of Dickson that way. He was just kind of a presence throughout the story. That was sus. He does have his sus moments, so it's not like the betrayal is out of nowhere. The main qualm I have with Dickson is when he dies. Because they kind of, like, try to make it into, like, an emotional moment. Like, Shulk, like, kind of cries or whatever. And at least when I played the game, that felt like kind of out of nowhere. But I see what they were going for. They were supposed to, like, show you that Shulk is sad because when he was growing up, Dickson was, like, the closest thing he had to, like, a father or uncle figure. Right? Because Dickson was the one who found Shulk. And then just throughout Shulk's life, he knew Dickson the whole time. And I get that. You know, I see what they were going for, but I don't really think it landed. To me, I never really had a good sense of Shulk and Dickson's bonds. At least to the extent that I should feel bad that Dickson's betraying Shulk. He always looked evil to me. I mean, you know, he's like a country boomer. And that's always sus, if you ask me. I never was an Alvis fan. I know a lot of people like him. A lot of people think he's sexy. I'm not saying they're wrong. Throughout the whole story, Alvis's true intentions and just existence is very ambiguous. And, like, you just want to know, right? When you just want to know who and what he is throughout the story, but you really don't find out until the very end of the game. He reveals himself to be the true Minato, and then he helps them defeat Zanza, and that's when he tells you about Klaus. At the time when that game came out, it felt very random. It felt very just, oh, Alright. It didn't really feel like this satisfying payoff. It just felt like, oh, sure. But now we're at the point with Xenoblade 2 where you can look back at that and you really appreciate his whole role in the story and how it connects to Xenoblade 2 and how it connects to Klaus. The whole thing with the Aegis Core, they even patched that into the Definitive Edition. I think all that's great. All those connections are great. Him, just by himself, I still think he's pretty cool. Like, I never disliked him. I don't think he's great. He's a good character. I know there's a lot of Alvis fans out there, so, you know. I know we just went over his disciples, but I want to leave Zanza for the latter half. We're going to go with Egil first. And I think I thought Egil was a good character. I thought, you know, his motivations, why he felt like he needed to fight the Bionists. I just felt like, I'm not saying I agreed with him, but I can see his point. And I think a good villain usually, if not always, has some sort of truth to what he's saying, right? And honestly, they even prove Egil right when the whole Zanza shit happens. Even though he's not actually the final boss, he does have like that final boss presence. Especially when he comes out there with that gold Mechon robot thing. That robot's cool. And to me, Egil has two of the most iconic moments in Xenoblade 1. Egil just throws out this line that I think a lot of Xenoblade 1 fans know is a really killer line. He says, "Your blade, it did not cut deep enough." And I thought that was such a powerful line, not just because literally his blade didn't cut deep enough because Shulk didn't win that fight, but also it just reflects the way that Shulk thinks he can convince Egil. And eventually he does, but at that time, what he thought was like his actual most powerful tool to save the world, it wasn't enough. I just thought that line in that moment with the meaning that it had to the whole story, super deep, and I like that. One of my favorite cutscenes in Xenoblade history, like top 5, is the scene where Minoth fights Zanza. My favorite part of that scene is Egil. Because after Minoth dissipates, she's just dead now, her swords fall from the sky, and Egil reaches out with the mech on hand to try to catch it, but then right before he's able to catch it, Zanza just whisks it away. I just thought that, like, there's no dialogue during that part, it's just the music and the visual. I just thought it was so powerful. Like, sometimes you don't need words. Just that imagery, it was just so tragic. A quintessential example of, like, Monolith Soft doing some excellent cutscene direction. At least me, I was rooting for Egil against Zanza. I mean, I would hope that people aren't rooting for Zanza in the first place, but when he starts doing his last stand against Zanza, you just feel like even though you've been fighting this dude the whole time, you want him to succeed. And I think that's exactly what they were trying to do, and it worked out. I know Zanza is an iconic character for Xenoblade fans. He really makes use of his screen time. Whenever he's on screen, you remember him. You feel his presence, right? And he just has the presence, kind of like how I said about Egil. He has the presence of like a final boss, just from the moment he appears, and just wreaks havoc in the most epic way. The reason why he's not higher is because just as a character and the whole history, his backstory and all that, to me that was never interesting, right? Like, to me, Zanza was memorable because of his cool final boss and also just like what he does, not really because who he is, if that makes sense. Let's start with the Naupons. I feel so bad because I remember liking this Naupon, but I don't remember her name. I remember Kino's name for some reason. All the Naupons in Xenoblade 1 are just kind of there. They're just kind of there to be cute. And that's fine, right? That's not a bad thing. But when I'm comparing them to other characters, especially the main characters, they're just going to end up lower on the tier list, right? Because it's not enough to be cute, right? Everybody else here has something more to them, except for Juju and Gael'gar. I think especially Riki, I feel like, is just inconsequential. There's like one cutscene he's known for, the conversation with Dunban. It's very uplifting, wholesome, Love that scene. But him as a character, he's just literally there to be cute. I think it's very common in like anime and JRPGs to just have this cute mascot character. A lot of times it's an animal. And that's exactly what Riki and the two other ones are. So, not bad characters. But the standards are too high for them to be higher. This character, I was half debating to put them in D tier. But I'm gonna be a little kind, because I do like them innately. That's Sharla. She's a C tier character. I feel so bad for Sharla and the dozen Sharla fans out there. Geralt's off somewhere. You don't know if he's alive or not. It's like a lingering thread throughout the bulk of the story. I didn't find myself rooting for that relationship. I didn't find myself rooting for them to reunite. It was more so that, like, it's probably gonna happen, and that'd be nice. You know, there's a difference. There's levels to that, and Sharla didn't hit that level that I felt. Sharla and Geralt didn't hit that level of, like, me actually caring about their relationship. It was just more like, okay, this is a thing, hope it gets resolved. And it did, but in my opinion, it ended off in an underwhelming way, because it's just like, you build throughout so much of the game trying to find Geralt. You fight Geralt, which is not surprising at that point, because of the whole, the metal face reveal. It's not surprising he's, like, bad for a moment. And then he sacrifices his life for you. I just feel like that whole sequence is just so brief, and it just ends so soon. And, like, maybe in the moments it might make you emotional, but then, like, it never actually has that much of an impact on the story or the characters. Let's get to Reyn and Sharla. Their whole thing, their, like, awkward romance, but not really thing, I wasn't into. I don't know what the deal... Like, I think from Reyn's perspective, it worked. Because for Reyn, him getting a woman's attention... That's important, you know? All the guys here, you know what I mean. When you get the attention of a woman you fancy, especially if they're older, that's important. That's a highlight for you. But on Sharla's side, I don't really understand... Like, Reyn was just kind of, I guess, filling the void of Geralt. But even if you want to go with that, I don't really think it was executed that interestingly. Because Sharla, I just feel like she's reduced to one of two dialogue lines, okay? I'm gonna summarize Sharla's character for you. Number one, you're so stupid, Reyn. Number two, you remind me of Geralt, Reyn. That's pretty much it for Sharla. She has some other instances, like she talks to Melia about her crush on Shulk one time. Like, I'm not saying that's literally all she is, but the fact that that's not that far off of a depiction of her, she just doesn't have as much to her as she probably should have. She serves her purpose for being a healer. And quite frankly, for being the fan service character, she has like the most outfits that show the most skin. Which is fine, that's fun, right? I'm not dissing that. But I just think when they try to be more meaningful with Sharla, with her story and her arcs and her development, it just fell flat. There's not a single thing they try to do with Sharla in terms of the story that I thought worked well. But she's still in C, because I don't want to be too harsh, you know? She's already Juju's sister, let's not be that harsh on her. I like Reyn a lot, he's awesome. He's just a great presence. He's like that meathead who's really dumb, himbo-ish qualities to him. That's always fun, of course. Characters like that are always just a nice time. But at the end of the day, you know he has your back, especially Shulk's back. I love the dynamic between them, I love the friendship between them. But he doesn't get any higher because of his ties to Sharla. Like, that was his main development as a character, and as I just said, I don't really think it was done well. Okay, I think the best representation of an A-tier character is my boy Dunban. Dunban, I don't know how you play Xenoblade 1 without thinking Dunban's cool. If you play Xenoblade 1 and for some reason you didn't like Dunban, I think that was a mistake. I think that's your fault. You did something wrong. Dunban, he's so cool, so badass. He's pretty much like the leader of the group sometimes because he's the adult. He used to be a hero, so it makes sense that he's the one leading and inspiring the troop a lot of times because he's been there. But he does have this obsession for fighting the Mechon, very similar to Shulk and Reyn, but his is the most intense. I mean, there's that whole scene where Shulk has to convince Dunban not to kill the metal-faced guy. I can't remember his name. I always like when characters can present contrasting qualities, right? He's really cool, really good guy, but here he wants to kill this motherfucker. He wants to kill this human being. I just like that contrast. Now, the reason why he's not an S tier is because I don't think he develops that much. Like, there is that whole thing with the revenge, but that's very similar to Shulk and Reyn, as I said. I'm gonna leave Shulk and Fiora for last, so that means Melia is next. And here's the thing, chat. I'm gonna start this off with something very controversial. But when I actually rank her, you're gonna feel fine, okay? But I have to say it. I think Melia is the most overrated character in Xenoblade. Not just Xenoblade 1, the whole trilogy. I don't even think she's the best character in Xenoblade 1. A lot of Melia stands out there, and I get it. It's not that I don't get it. She's definitely an A-tier character. It's not like I don't get the praise for her. But I think there are clear weaknesses to her character, which I will address. But first, if you didn't know, her character design's great, her personality's great, her arcs in the story are very memorable and compelling. Just in so many ways, she's great, right? That's why she's so beloved. But here's why she's not higher. Here's why she's not an S tier, especially. Let's describe the parts where she's important, and then I think when I describe it, maybe you'll get a better understanding of what I'm trying to say here. So, there's the part where you have to save her from the assassination plot. That was great. There's the whole sequence of events at Prison Tower where her dad dies. That's great. And then, later on, the whole thing with Callian becoming a Telethia and then you having to fight Lorithia. All great, right? But there's a big gap in the middle between those two great arcs, right? There's a big gap there. And that's the weakness of Melia. Because either it's the whole friend zone thing with Shulk, or she's just not noticeable at all. So to start with the whole friend zone thing with Shulk, they wanted to make you feel bad for Melia. That's like the whole thing with Xenoblade 1. Oh, don't you feel bad for Melia? That's like her whole thing. And I guess that friend zone thing was like just that last like cherry on top, and I just don't think it was necessary. Like the whole treatment of that, like how Shulk and Fiora ran past her and it like slow-mo to her facial expression, like it was just so unnecessary, so mean-spirited for no reason. Like I guess it builds to like that conversation between Fiora and Melia, but like you didn't need that. Like it's just, it's like stupid but also funny, which is why I think people look at a certain cutscene in Xenoblade 2 the same way, even though that scene was very different to what happens to Melia. I didn't see the purpose of that, besides making you feel bad for her, which was already unneeded because her family freaking dies over and over. And then you have the other half of that statement, which is, she's not that noticeable. When I streamed Definitive Edition, there was a surprising amount of cutscenes where I realized that Melia has nothing to say. Like, the best she'll say is, yeah, I agree, let's do that. And that's not really contributing to the conversation. That's just you reminding people, hey, I'm still here. I promise you, there are more scenes like that than you think. It just stuck out like a sore thumb, that revelation. Like, wow. Like, when I first played the game, I was like everybody else. I thought she was the best character, and she just made such a huge impression on me. But then I replayed the game, and I'm like, oh, she's actually not as important as I remembered. She's actually not even, like, that talkative sometimes. Like, that scene with Dunban and Riki, well, you might have forgot Melia's in that cutscene. What's she doing? She's sleeping. If you're one of the best characters in Xenoblade, if you're an S-tier character, you don't have that. Your presence is always felt. Melia's presence is not always felt. In fact, it's oddly missing sometimes. For a character who's so well written otherwise, I just feel like it's just weird that sometimes she has nothing to say. And another thing, with Xenoblade 3, she is in Xenoblade 3, we're talking spoilers, she's in Xenoblade 3, her design, again, great, her personality, great, her side quests, post-game, great, but I will admit, on the inside, I was kind of rolling my metaphorical eyes, because they make you feel bad for Melia again. Not only is she kidnapped, but in her side quests, it's just about her feeling lonely. It's like, alright, I don't I don't need this whole pity party for Melia again. We've already been through this. Like, Future Connected was supposed to be this moment where she, like, finally, like, yes, Melia's finally winning, yes. Like, Future Connected is basically an apology to Melia fans. So now we're going with Shulk and Fiora. Let's go with Shulk. I think I would put Shulk right here. Probably the biggest reason to me that I appreciate Shulk is that usually in anime or JRPGs, the main protagonist is usually, like, more silly or like younger or optimistic. There's just certain qualities when you think of like a shonen anime, especially, there's just certain qualities you just expect to have in the protagonist. But Shulk felt very refreshing to me because he's not really optimistic. He's not really that much of an outgoing, sociable guy. In fact, he's a nerd. He is a nerd, but like I said about Dunban, I like it when there's contrasting qualities, because that's how real human beings are. They're not just one note. There are moments, there are aspects to them that are very contradicting. And with Shulk, you get that right out the gate, because you see him as this introverted, nerdy guy. But when Fiora dies, all of a sudden, from the get-go, he wants revenge. All of a sudden, he's so determined. I just love to see that contrast, like those unexpected traits. Especially in Shulk, you see that very early in the game, and I appreciate that. One thing that relates to Zanza, by the way, that I forgot to mention, but it's fitting for Shulk too. I like how the whole Zanza being inside of him is foreshadowed. Because even though it's a very shocking plot twist, if you think about the story in retrospect, or just play the game again, or watch it again, you'll see that there's so many great instances of foreshadowing. My favorite is when he's talking to Reyn about revenge. I forget exactly how the conversation goes, but he says something like, on one hand, I want to listen to Dunban and just stay in the colony. But on the other hand, there's this raging voice in my head that's screaming to take revenge. I freaking love that, right? Because now that we know spoilers, we know that voice was Zanza, and it feels obvious. But in that moment, when you first play or watch the game, you just think, oh, that's just a natural thing someone would say. Right? It's just someone being conflicted. It just feels very natural. Like, that's something you could hear in a real conversation. But the fact that that implicates so much more than you expect, I love writing like that. Monolith Soft is excellent at that. And that's a very, again, I think Shulk, just from the get-go, establishes so many qualities that are refreshing and also just great writing-wise. And plus, he has the Monado. I mean, let's be real. He has the Monado. That's bonus points. The Monado, iconic weapon. Now, the reason why he's not S tier, in fact, I ranked him lower than Dunban and Melia, is because I don't think he's necessarily a character. Just like, if I strip him down to his basic qualities, right? Like, let's say there's no drama going on, just him on his own. I don't think he's a character that I necessarily find entertaining. I'm not bragging about Shulk being this excellent character, you know? It's more so that it's a nice change of pace, and the way the writing is, and everything going on with him, and the Monado and Zanza, that's all very well done. Alright, last but not least, there's a reason why I say Fiora for last. I think Fiora is the best character in Xenoblade 1. I almost put her in S tier, and then I thought about it. I'm like, okay, well, she is just kind of like this go-getter character throughout the whole game. She doesn't really, like, her personality or, like, her beliefs don't really change that much. So, that's why she's not an S. She doesn't really evolve in terms of her. Obviously, she changes in terms of her appearance and, like, her role in the story. But just like her, personally, she doesn't evolve that much. And I think everybody who will end up in S tier, you'll see a notable difference in how they develop throughout the story. But Fiora is my favorite character in Xenoblade 1. Just because I think she's so likable, and just the whole thing of how the story progresses. Like, first, you really want to avenge her because she was so likable, but then you find out she's alive, and then now you're so determined to go get her and get her memories back. And then she joins as the 7th party member, which we all know at this point, if you're familiar with Xenoblade, that is a famous spoiler that Xenoblade fans try their best to obscure. Most importantly, when I'm comparing them to the rest of the characters here in A tier, I like that she has a very defined and interesting bond with each of the party members. It's not just her relationship with Shulk, which, by the way, the romance and relationship between Shulk and Fiora, probably my favorite part of Xenoblade 1's story, right? So that already is gonna make her higher on this tier list, but just also the fact that you have the friendship with Reyn, of course, the Shulk, Fiora, and Reyn friendship, the fact that Dunban's her brother, and there's that whole bond there, her bond with Melia. She just has a lot of, like, things going for her that are really entertaining, interesting, and just worthwhile. Like, I never really felt like anything they did with Fiora fell flat. I felt like she succeeded in so many ways, and literally the only reason why she's not an S tier is because she herself doesn't change as much as I would have hoped for an S tier character. Okay, now we're about to start with Xenoblade 2. Xenoblade 2 has a lot more characters to talk about, but if you haven't heard by now, I did make a Xenoblade 2 retrospective that was 3.5 hours long. I was quite thorough with how I felt about most, if not all, these characters. So I'm going to make this a little more fast-paced, not just because there's a lot of characters to talk about, but also because I already kind of told you what I felt about them. Emphasis on try. I'll try to be a little more quick here. I'm going to start with the antagonists again. Let's start with the subordinates of Torna, the group, the faction. Let's go with Akhos first. So Akhos, I don't care what anyone says. I don't care. No, never mind. Okay, I was about to put Akhos in C, or B tier, but I'm going to put him in C. Akhos is like my guilty pleasure. I freaking love this dude. I don't know. I think his dialogue is so funny, but like in an asshole way. I think he is just so good at being that asshole. That asshole you want to beat up simply because he's an asshole. Like, even if he wasn't trying to destroy the world, you just want to see him get punched because he's an asshole. I appreciate just how well-crafted his dialogue and just his old mannerisms were to create that kind of character, right? But there is a weakness to him, which I think is maybe not major, but it is significant because the game wants you to care about it. It's when he dies and he's with Patroka, and like there's that flashback with him and Patroka, and it's trying to like make you feel sympathetic. That didn't land. That didn't need to be there. It just felt very tacked on. I just felt like Akhos would have been better if he was just simply an asshole, and then maybe turn him into a likable asshole. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to all of a sudden go, oh, well, actually, you should feel bad for him. You don't need to do that for everybody. Speaking of Patroka, by far, not even a question, the least interesting member of Torna. Again, the whole flashback fell flat, and they just didn't really have that much for her outside of that. She's just very, like, spunky, and that's kind of it. Even the person who made this tier list forgot about Patroka. Either that or I'm blind. But either way, that sums it up. So if you're wondering about Patroka, that's what happens. Next up is Mikhail. I'll put Mikhail... Honestly, I like Mikhail a lot. I'd put him, like, right here. the whole part where he starts to help you might seem like it comes out of nowhere. I totally get that in the confines of the base game, but they do actually like foreshadow it a few times in the actual base game. They're more subtle. They're not. It's not really like pointed out to you like, hey, check this out. Isn't Mikhail so sus? It's not like that. It's just a bit more subtle than what you might expect. I usually don't like those kind of characters where they're like they're charming and they joke a lot and they hit on women. That kind of stuff. I'm not really into those characters normally, but I think the way he ends up sacrificing himself, as well as Torna, I think was what compelled me to put him in B tier. I think playing Torna really gives you a whole new perspective on Mikhail. But not whole new in terms of like, wow, this came out of nowhere. But more that like, wow, like, now I get it. You know, now I understand. Like, you just start to get a way better appreciation. You have to be kind of attentive to fully appreciate how he's written in the main story. For another example I like is that Patroka and Akhos reveal themselves to be flesh eaters when you fight them in Tantal. At that point, the party members are like, oh snap, they're flesh eaters. And as the player, you probably accept, oh, they're all flesh eaters. That's crazy. But you never see a flesh eater core on Mikhail. He still has his normal blade core. And that's because he's not a flesh eater. You find out later he's a blade eater. Like, just those kind of details I think Mikhail has a lot of. Where, like, you're not going to appreciate them, most likely, on your first playthrough. But I think in retrospect, and especially upon playing Torna, you do get, like, so much out of it. I just like that kind of storytelling that really rewards you for reflecting and just re-experiencing. You just feel like you're not just seeing the same old story. You feel like you're still getting more out of it. So the thing about Amalthus, the reason why a lot of people don't like him, or just don't think he's that good of a character, is because it's quite predictable. It's quite predictable that he's sus. But as I stated in my retrospective, it's not really supposed to be unpredictable. The whole church evil trope, very commonplace, especially in JRPGs. So, like, I actually respect the fact that they didn't even bother. Instead of focusing on, like, is this guy evil or not, or trying to fool you that he's not evil, the writers were like, okay, you know this based on all those tropes, but can you connect the dots? Can you figure out why he's evil? Can you figure out how he connects to everything else? I thought that was a very unique way to write a villain. Again, it's very easy to look at it and be like, oh, he's just another guy who's delusional and thinks he's God's servant and all that. But you have to think about it, right? This is a world where God exists. Alres literally has a god, and they know where he is. It's not like real life where, like, people have their own different beliefs. No, the god's right there. It's at the world tree. I'll just put him here for now, since I'm already talking about him. Klaus is not a good or bad guy. He made a huge mistake. But, like, I think it's an important message. Just because you're not contributing to something doesn't mean you're not involved. It doesn't mean it's not your fault. Taking the approach of, like, hey, hands off, you know, this isn't me. Well, it's not that simple, especially when you're a god like Klaus. Like, Amalthus is the direct consequence of how Klaus decided to be a god, which is, you know, not by doing much after he established the rules of the world. Okay, I'm gonna put Malos at the top of B alongside Reyn. I was thinking about putting him in A because I really like Malos. I think Malos, when I was talking about how Mikhail had all these details that you would only appreciate fully if you reflect or re-experience, I think Malos is the greatest example. I said this in my retrospective. Malos is the character whose appreciation I had for them increased the most. The more I play the game, the more I watch the game. I think on the surface, he is a very simple, straightforward character, at least for most of the game, until you find out about his whole existential crisis with Amalthus. But I feel like just the more you dig deeper into the story and just see his dialogue lines, the way he acts sometimes, his mannerisms, It just all adds up. It's a very rewarding character to me. Oh, it's so sad. I said it in the retrospect. The fact that Jin is what proves to him just his, like, last hope of, like, yeah, I can be my own person. I can want my own things. But also the fact that Jin is the opposite as well, because Jin reminds Malos that, no, actually, I am doomed to be this. Because the whole reason why my friend's life is fucked up is because of what I did. Right? I love that. Just that very complex, nuanced friendship between Jin and Malos. His English voice actor is one of my favorites. His performance is just so strong. And I just think, I like the fact that he's the final boss too. Because in a game like this, you probably think, oh, well, the church guy or God is gonna be the villain, the final boss. But no, it's Malos, the guy you meet in Chapter 1. And it's justified, of course. I like that. I like that subverting expectations as well. I think Xenoblade 2 does that a lot, which I'll continue to point out. Also, by the way, I forgot to tell you more about Klaus. I think Klaus is in B tier just because he kind of has to be. I think the whole reveal of him being the architect, phenomenal twist. One of the best twists in gaming. I don't care what you say. One of the best twists. It makes you look at not just this game, but the whole franchise differently. And as I said about subverting expectations, I appreciate the fact that Klaus isn't like an evil god. He's just a guy who's just very sad. He's just disappointed. He's not mad, he's disappointed. Just the lack of hope that he has. I just felt like him being the way he was, just if we ignore the whole connections to Xenoblade 1, just him being the way he was so refreshing in terms of depicting a god. Just felt unique. It felt just relatable, human-wise. And the fact, just that attitude he has, like I said about Amalthus, just that attitude he has, even though you understand it, it's like the whole reason why things unfold. It's just, it really portrays the importance of your reaction, or lack of reaction, right? And I think that's a powerful statement to make with a guy like Klaus. We're going to talk about the last antagonist of Xenoblade 2, former protagonist in Torna. And this is going to be the first S-tier character. I freaking love Jin. Jin is one of my favorite characters, and it's not even a question that he's my favorite antagonist in Xenoblade. I think he is so incredibly well written. I know, like, just you look at him, he has a mask on, he has the long silver hair, he has a long sword. It's easy to just be like, oh, this guy's really anime. He reminds me of Sephiroth, and all these other kind of jokes. But just the way that they wrote him, and how he evolves throughout the story. He has some great lines, right? The whole speech in Chapter 5, I thought that was incredible. He has great lines of dialogue, but what elevates him is just his facial expressions. There are so many moments in the game where he doesn't say anything. He doesn't say anything. But just through just the way he reacts, it's just so powerful. The best example for me is when, well, two of them I put in the retrospective, is the one where he kills Haze and he gets like a PTSD flashback to Lora and just his face after that. And then, after he kills Lora, just his whole reaction there was just spectacular. His bond with Lora and the whole tragedy behind that, one of my favorites in the game. That goes without saying. Just the way his facial expressions were so powerful, I thought it was so smart how for the first half of the game, he's wearing the mask. You're literally seeing a new side of him once he takes off that mask. You're seeing who he really is. Because up to that point, he seems like the cliche villain, right? But once he takes off that mask, you really do get to know him in more ways than one. He is very justified in his motivations. The fact that he had to sit for 500 years and see everybody worship the guy who caused everything to F up. I don't blame him for disliking humans. Humans suck. I get it. Again, his bond with Malos, his bond with Lora, like I said. There's just so many things about Jin that are compelling. And even as a protagonist in Torna the DLC, he's still likable. But what I appreciate is that he's not that far off from how he is in the base game. He has the same personality traits, it's just that certain ones are more emphasized due to the circumstances. I really respect that. Like, he does change and develop as a character, but it's not so radical that, you know, because a lot of times when they do the whole hero to villain thing, it can just be like a 180. But Jin, it actually feels like a natural evolution due to the circumstances. I don't have any nitpicks even about the way Jin was written. I just think it was superb. Just everything about him is compelling. And so many memorable moments in the game I think about. It has Jin in it. And just the way he goes out without any words, just goes out silently. Such a beautiful moment. I'll go to Lora next since we already talked about it. I said in my retrospective she's the best, like, main protagonist, like, compared to Shulk and Rex and Elma. We'll talk more about that when I get to Noah, but regardless, that obviously shows you that I think highly of Lora. The whole thing she has with Jin, we've already established. Phenomenal. She is, like, so freaking likable. I like how she affects others, not just Jin, but, like, the kids, Milton and Mikhail. I feel like she has good banter with everybody in the group. The only thing she's missing is similar to Fiora, in that her character herself doesn't really change. Okay, I'll put her at the end of B. I was thinking about doing C tier, because I think Haze is one of the most disappointing characters to me. Just because she's also really likable, she's so cute and wholesome. You want to know more about her, but like story-wise, I thought Torna was the perfect opportunity. But Torna, the DLC, is very focused on Jin and Lora, and I understand that, but, you know, Haze is right there. And the fact that she gets killed by Jin, I felt like it would have been a great opportunity to expand more on her relationship with Jin and Lora. But you don't really get that. Like, you get that somewhat in the side quests, right? She's just a nice addition to the party. She's great. Like, I'm not saying I don't like her. It's just that it just feels like a missed opportunity to me. Speaking of underwhelming, I said this in my retrospective. It's very simple. I think Hugo is just whatever. He's fine. You know, it's alright. Hugo's okay. I don't know. Like, he's just kind of a fan service character because he looks like Niall, and Niall was great in the base game. Unfortunately, I'm not ranking Niall, but it's just Hugo who looks like Niall. And I know some people, they probably like Hugo more or whatever, but just to me, it didn't really resonate, and that's why Hugo's in the C. The fact that Minoth is the playwright and just closely tied to Van Damme, I thought like maybe you would get more from him, from Torna. But he's just kind of one of the more extra characters who are there for fun. And that's great. He is a fun guy to have around. Haze and Minoth, like I said, super similar in how I feel about them. I am putting my boy Adam at the top of A tier. Adam is the homie. I kind of want to put him in S, to be honest. Adam just is dripping with charisma that you just want to latch onto and get every bit that you can. He is such a likable character, so entertaining, so endearing. I love his relationship with Mythra, how he inspires Mythra in ways that she doesn't want to admit, but like just throughout the story in more subtle ways as well. You see how Mythra is influenced by Adam. I think it's so tragic the way his story like, he's a tragic hero. Like, he goes on as this not living, but this legendary hero. But like, the way his story ends, it's a sad one. It's not a happy one. Like, he himself is not happy with how he was able to handle things. Like, all his fears came true. And again, that contrast, right? That contrast from this happy-go-lucky, jovial, affable person, and then just this sad, insecure person who's disappointed with themselves. Like, that contrast is to a T with Adam. But yeah, I mean, he's just awesome. And he's very handsome. I love his character design. Van Damme is literally featured in one chapter. Yet he is one of the most beloved characters in Xenoblade 2, to the point that they had a look-alike in Xenoblade 3. If that does not summarize why he should be an A tier, I mean, I don't know what else I could tell you. Like, that sums it up. He makes use of his screen time so much. In the brief time that you know him, you just grow attached to him so deeply. It's kind of like what I was saying with Zanza. How, like, they're not there for a long time, but they're there for a good time. And Van Damme, I think, is, like, way more effective in that respect. And plus, he's the fact that he joins your party is, like, extra attachment to him. And, you know, just his sacrifice meant so much as well to Rex and Nia. It really shaped who they would become. I just think he's such an impactful character in so many ways in one. And just the fact that it's accomplished in a single chapter, I think that's awesome. I think Pandoria, underrated girl. The most underrated girl in Xenoblade 2. And to be fair, I understand why. It's because, like, she doesn't really, like, develop that much. She's, like, the least important character to the story among the party members. I get that. I totally get it. But she's just so entertaining. Maybe I shouldn't put her ahead of Van Damme just out of respect, but I just feel like Pandoria is such a fun person to be around whenever she's on screen, whenever she has the banter with Zeke. But it's not just with Zeke, like her heart-to-hearts, just every cutscene that she's in, I get a kick out of her. She's great. There's not really that much reasons outside of that. Well, there are more that I could talk about, but I'm going to talk about them when I talk about my boy, Zeke Von Gambu, and I'm putting him right. I'm actually going to put him ahead of Adam. I think very highly, unironically, of Zeke. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing about Zeke. I was actually even thinking about putting him in S tier, but I won't go that far. I know it seems like a meme, because he's, you know, he's a very funny character. And he gets, like, he's like the butt of the joke a lot of times. But here's the thing about Zeke. He starts out as, like, a running gag, right? You don't really take him seriously. He's just this comedic side villain. But then it turns out, well, no, not only is he a good guy, but he also joins your party. Nobody didn't pop off when Zeke joined the party. Because that's just how just funny and entertaining that he is. But he's more than that. Because he could have easily been just the funny guy, right? I talked about the Naupons in Xenoblade 1, how they're there just to be cute. A lot of times in anime or JRPG or whatever, they have a recurring character who's just there to be funny, right? They could have gotten away with that, but they didn't. They didn't. Right after he joins your party, or hell, right when he joins your party, he shows you more of his serious side. Like, when he has to turn that switch from being stupid himbo to serious political guy, he can do it. He flips that switch. It feels like weird, but also like, oh, of course, he's a prince. And it just feels natural the way he, like, carries himself. Like, he blends in with them. When they're doing the ceasefire meeting in Chapter 6, he blends in with them. Oh, Zaclaris, our boy. But then you see in Chapter 7 the flashback with Pandoria and Zeke. I think Zeke and Pandoria's bond, one of my favorite things in Xenoblade 2. They complement each other so well. Their chemistry is awesome. They are just, like, one of the most entertaining things going on in Xenoblade, period. Just Zeke and Pandoria. I think they complete each other. Zeke would not be Zeke without Pandoria, and Pandoria would not be Pandoria without Zeke. But in the case of the flashbacks specifically, you get to see both of them in a way that you've never seen them before. You get to see them in a way that's very sad, right? Like, Zeke's literally about to die. That's very sad. and it's like a very, like, emotional and dramatic moment, but it works. Basically, the point I'm saying is that no matter what emotion Zeke has to do in the story, it's always excellent. When they want him to be funny, he's really funny. When they want him to be serious, he nails it. When it's sad, it's really sad. He nails, like, going from a running gag to a character who can do every emotion, make you feel every emotion. That's not easy. In fact, most, you know, media, they just have that character be funny. They don't even try at all. But the fact that Zeke subverts your expectations, and then just excels just throughout all those emotional ranges, I think is just so incredible. I just feel like no matter what cutscene it is, if Zeke's talking, it's a good time, right? Zeke and Pandoria, but more so Zeke, just because he has more of a backstory and characterization to him. Next up is Brigid. I'm going to put Brigid at the top of B tier. B for Brigid. Brigid is a character I really like. I love her personality. I love her attitude. I even love her design. I'm not saying that just because there's some powerful cleavage there. I'm legit. Like, I love her design. I love how all her colors it's just great. I just think everything's exquisite about her. But she clearly doesn't have as much going on for her as everybody in A. Like, I think you could argue that Pandoria should be in B, but I think Pandoria, just because she's tied to Zeke, and just how their chemistry is so tangible throughout the whole game, I just had to put her in A. Whereas with Brigid, I like her bond with Morag. It's great, especially in Heart to Hearts. It's really funny and entertaining. But it's just not... It's just like a minor step below Zeke and Pandoria, but far enough that I feel like she should be in B. Like, if I told you that Brigid was one of my favorite characters, you might be, like, surprised. And I wouldn't blame you for being surprised, right? I think she's great, but I don't think she's a character that has enough going for her that it's, like, obvious that she's great, if that makes sense. Morag, I'm going to place between Van Damme and Pandoria. I think Morag is a more subdued character in terms of how she develops and how she's characterized. She's kind of like Adam in that she's just dripping with charisma. Like, the moment she appears, you're like, oh, okay, who's this? And then the moment she speaks, especially in the English dub, the original Japanese, it's kind of more like, you know, oh, well, she dresses masculine, so let's give her a more masculine voice. It's kind of like more cliche, but I think her English dub performance is so good. Definitely one of my favorite performances. That voice actor herself oozes charisma, so to place it on Morag, it just does her character's wonders. And just her role overall, like, I appreciate that both Zeke and Morag, I mean, it helps that they're forms of authority, but I like that they continue to have a substantial effect on the story. Because a lot of times in JRPG, when they join the party, they just kind of blend in. But I feel like both Zeke and Morag continue to stand out even when they join the party. Personally speaking, I like her more than the other girls on this list. Or, not the list, the tier. But character-wise, she's definitely on the lower end of A. Okay, I'm gonna do it. Poppy is an S-tier character. Similar to Zeke, they start off as a character that you don't really expect much from in terms of being compelling, being important to the story, being someone you would feel emotional for, right? They just start off as a joke, but they evolve into something much more than that. Really, a lot of what I said for Zeke, you can translate over to Poppy. But I think Poppy, just because she's more relevant to the story, that's what bumps her to S tier. And she actually does develop a lot more than Zeke. Like, I mean, literally, right? Going from the robot to actually becoming more human-like, that's like an easy kind of development thing. But the way it's done, the way it's not shoved in your face, I said it in the retrospective, but I cannot understate that enough. Just how much I appreciate that it just happens naturally. It's not told to you, hey, Poppy's voice sounds kind of different. It's not told to you, hey, she's starting to act more human-like. It just happens. It just happens, and you notice it for yourself. Because everyone knows it's coming. Like, when you see a robot, and they're a main character, you know it's coming. It's like a trope as old as time. But the fact they did it in such a refreshing manner, I appreciate so much. You add on everything I said about Zeke, there you go. S-tier character. No question. Next character is the divisive character. Poppy's other half, Tora. You know what? I'm gonna make a statement. I don't care. I'm gonna put Tora right below Mikhail. The middle of B tier. I would never tell you Tora's a great character, but I appreciate the fact that he's the Napon character. His backstory and his arc is actually really important to the game. By the way, this song is throwing me off. Not that it's a bad song, but it's not the vibe I'm trying to. It's not the vibe I'm trying to get right now. I know Tora is divisive because he has a high-pitched voice, and Xenoblade games are very chatty, so that kind of gets grating, you know. And also the whole thing, his more like weird pervy side. But like I said in the retrospective, Tora's a kid. Like, I think the way some people talk about Tora, it's like he's this adult, this creepy adult, but he's literally younger than Rex. I mean, I don't know about how old he is in Napon years, but based on their dynamic, and just the fact that he is a kid Napon, we can assume that Tora is younger than Rex, and Rex is 15. It's not like Tora is this 20-plus-year-old going around being weird. He doesn't even really, like, provoke any harassment or anything like that. The closest thing is Blushy Crushy, which that's more so just like a parody of maid cafe culture. It's more like poking fun at it and calling it cringe, which, you know, in that heart to heart, it very much is cringe. The fact that he actually contributes to the story, I like how he looks up to Rex and how that influences him. You can especially see it with Poppy Cutie Pie. I like his bond with Poppy. I feel bad that it has been misconstrued to some other weirdness, but hey, it just happens, I guess. This is gonna hurt my feelings by doing this, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put Dromark in C tier. I think out of everybody in the party, he is clearly the one with the least to him. He's just kind of Nia's blade. And again, there is some fun things with him, but unfortunately, there's really not that much. They didn't give him that much. What they did give him is fun, but just not enough to make it to B, unfortunately. Like, it pains me because I really do like Dromark. Flora heals an aching soul. Let's do Rex first. I'm going to put Rex at the top of B. And that hurts me because I really like Rex. I think he's the protagonist that develops the most. But I have to I'm trying to be as objective as possible here. The fact is, his character design is not great, at least until you get the Master Driver, then it's pretty sick. But for most of the game, his character design isn't great. And his English dub is memes for reasons that I think are valid. And even though those things are superficial, it did impact the way that people perceived him. I don't think it's entirely fair, but it is a fact. Those things are part of the character. To me, in my heart, he's an A-tier character. But if I'm being, like, fair and considering everyone's perspective, he's a B character. Like, the top of B. Wait a second! Wait a second! Wait a darn second! Psych! He's an A-tier. And I'll tell you why. Because my boy Rex, at the end of Xenoblade 3, he showed us a thing or three. He became the man I always knew he could become. And just because of that, he's golden A tier. He said, I love you and all you guys, and he meant it. Not sure where to put Pyra in terms of... I know what tier, I just don't know where exactly. Okay, I'm going to put her right next to Melia. A lot of things that I personally attached to when it comes to Pyra, it is directly because of Mythra. So, personally, I think it's more fitting to reward Mythra for those things more than Pyra, but I do think Pyra just by herself, I mean, she's popular for a reason. It's not because of her outfit, because I don't like her outfit. She's just a likable character. Her story is great. I love that... Here's one thing I will say. I like that Pyra in Xenoblade 2, the base game, if you notice, whenever there's like a serious or dramatic or emotional cutscene, it's usually Pyra. Like, for example, when she threatens to commit suicide to save her friends, that's Pyra doing that. When she's talking about Adam fondly, that's Pyra doing that, even though it was Mythra who spent that time with Adam. It's Pyra who's the one who's talking about it. I don't have much else to say because a lot of it carries over to Mythra, who I'm putting in S tier. The most predictable thing, if you know me. I think Mythra is the most well-written character in Xenoblade. I'll be straight up right now. The story of Pyra and Mythra, but mostly Mythra, that she goes through from the Aegis War trauma. Well, she starts off as this she's just there because Adam summoned her. She doesn't really care about the world. But the way you see her start to latch on to the world through, like, Milton and just the party in general, they're the experiences they have. But then to have that culminate with her being the reason why Torna dies, essentially. The whole kingdom collapsed because of her. Because she's not able to control her powers, and as well as Adam isn't able to control her powers. It's just obviously very sad. That ending of Torna the DLC is crushing. And then the fact that she creates Pyra because of just how she feels, all the guilt she feels. This song is just perfect for this moment, by the way. I feel like everybody, not everybody, a lot of people who haven't played Xenoblade 2 probably think Mythra is like a power-up for Pyra, like a Super Saiyan form. But she's not. She's the original version. I like that subverting expectations. I thought her introduction was spectacular. I love the way they foreshadowed her. It's easy to take for granted, but they foreshadowed her so well. In terms of her growth as a character, it's really strong. It's really the core of the story that's told throughout Torna and Xenoblade 2, the main game. So it's not that surprising that it's that strong. And I also just like her even outside of that. So many of my favorite quotes, whether it's the battle dialogue, or the heart-to-hearts, or the cutscenes, a lot of it's from Mythra. She's just a very entertaining personality. I just feel like she's always giving something to appreciate about the story and or about herself. A strong backstory, strong characterization, strong developments, entertainment factor, strong bonds with the party, just a character who succeeds in literally every way. Last but not least, I know, you're gonna roll your eyes. Another Xenoblade 2 character in S tier. You're damn right, another Xenoblade 2 character in S tier. Nia, she's a fan favorite. She's beloved. She's in Xenoblade 3 along with Melia. It's not that weird that I think that she's an extraordinary character. And it's pretty much what I said about Mythra, but to a lesser extent. Where, like, by herself, she is entertaining. And she has great bonds with everyone, established. You just feel the chemistry of the group, especially when it involves her. And her backstory really shapes her character, and it has a sizable effect on the plot. If she didn't feel that way, if she didn't have that trauma, then Van Damme wouldn't have died. That's the most, like, notable one, but it shapes her in so many ways. It's just a tangible effect throughout the whole story. What I will say about these S-tier characters, especially Mythra and Nia, you always feel their presence in the group. Okay? It's not just the fact that they have a good character arc. It's not the fact that they're compelling in the story. It's just that no matter what situation they are in, you feel their presence. Their presence is always there. They always have something meaningful to say. It's not just, yes, I agree. They always have something of value to add to the conversation, whether it's serious, whether it's entertaining, whether it's sad. Just, they always have it. Like, Nia always has something... she always has something to say. But I mean that in the best way possible. Let's move on to Xenoblade 3, finally. I alluded to the fact that the main antagonist wasn't as compelling as I hoped they would be, and that was referring to Zed. Zed, to me, just serves their purpose. I like that Zed is the, basically the incarnation of the people's fears from the worlds colliding, because we see something similar with that with Malos. Malos is the incarnation of Amalthus's despair, right? We've seen something like that before, but Zed is on a wider scale. And it makes sense too, because like with the Ouroboros and the Mobius and Origin, you can see a lot of allusions and similarities to Blades, right? So it makes sense that Zed has a similar thing going on that Malos had from Amalthus. I like that, right? That's great. But here's my problem, is that unlike the characters I just talked about, Mythra and Nia, you don't really feel Zed's presence that much throughout the story. Like, you don't even confront Zed until the very end of the game. And I know why they did that. They wanted to keep his existence a mystery. Like, just make it ambiguous and obscure as possible. Leave you wondering the whole time, like, who is the mastermind behind all of this? I totally get that. But because the truth about him is so nebulous, that's not, at least to me, that wasn't like this huge payoff from waiting to see Zed. Like, I thought Zed was gonna be like this previous character we used to know. Like, it was just this huge reveal about who he was. No, it was just kind of like, yeah, he's he's just the feelings people had. And again, I don't think that's bad. It's just that as a payoff, it wasn't that satisfying to me after all the suspense that they built up to him. It felt more like a means to an end than like this villain that they spent a lot of time thinking about. It was more like, okay, well, we need a face to embody and represent this concept. Okay, that's Zed. That's what he feels like, other than like his own actual character. I mean, that's literally true, but I was hoping it wouldn't feel that way, and well, it does feel that way. Let's go with N and M, since they're connected to Zed. I'm gonna put both of them in B, just because it's kind of a similar case with Mythra and Pyra, where like, I think the more interesting parts about them are reflected in their other self. I'll put them right here in the middle. Just this image of Tora in front of them. I'm sure will get some people mad. I think N, along with the next few characters, the game's way of portraying perspective, like, hey, I know Mobius seems like this dastardly thing, but here's why someone would actually want to be Mobius. And I think they do that well with N, because my boy, he literally was sat down in a theater, and he was showed all his past lives and all the tragic memories. After you see that kind of stuff, I mean, come on, like, we're all human. I forget who originally said it, but I know at least Noah describes it as the impossible choice. One of the major themes of Xenoblade 3's story is just the power of choice. But N is like the opposite example of that, because he has the impossible choice. He was given a choice, but that choice was just like, do I suffer for eternity, or do I make other people suffer? I know we all would love to say, oh, well, of course we'd be selfless and not allow other people to suffer, but like, when you think about it realistically and practically, that is like an impossible choice to make, an impossible choice to be so certain about. And like how Noah even reassures, like, yeah, if I was in his shoes, I probably would have done the same thing. The whole flashbacks with N and M in the past, very well done. That was such a suspenseful, intriguing, and sad sequence of events there. Let's talk about M real quick. I love how M factors into the story, the whole plot twist, but just the way that you can look back at that jail sequence and you just see it in a whole different light. You see that she was talking about her Noah, but like, I just love how that dialogue is both true for both M and Mio, because M, she adopted Mio's memories and of course her body. She's speaking for both of them in those situations. It just adds so much more weight to that sequence, which already had so much weight. Like, that jail sequence, probably my favorite cutscenes in Xenoblade. So speaking of perspective, Yorin is another way the game conveys that, like, hey, this is someone who would think that being Mobius is good. You're supposed to feel bad for them, right? You're supposed to relate to that. You're supposed to be empathetic towards that. But unfortunately, I don't think it landed well with Yorin. I will be honest. My problem with Yorin boils down to literally one thing. One choice. that the writers made that I just disagreed with wholly. Okay? Because when you see him in the past hanging out with Lance, Eunie, and Noah, that's all great. I liked Yorn in the past. It was cool. Like, you wanted to root for him. You wanted to see him succeed. And the way he selflessly sacrifices himself, you just look back at him pretty fondly, right? And I even like his motivation to be Mobius. The fact that he's just not really a successful or naturally gifted person. And he also just wants to escape the life cycle, which was shown to him. It was just like constant L's. Constant L's left and right. So I like that too. But this is where the problem comes in. When he becomes Mobius, his personality 180s. And then when he sacrifices himself, it like 90 degrees back. I don't like that. I talked about this with Jin. Whenever someone goes from a good guy to a bad guy, or vice versa, I don't want their personality just 180. I want it to be a natural evolution. It legit felt like you were talking to someone different. Haha, this was me all along, what are you talking about? And then just kind of being just another villain on it. He's just another villain until the very end. And so when we get to that very end, I didn't feel that sad about his sacrifice. I was just like, well, this makes sense for the story to go. Like, I just felt like they should have retained some semblance of himself throughout his Mobius lifespan. And to offer another way they could have done it, they could have done it so that Yorin, he doesn't flip personalities, but he still is fighting the group. He's still against the group because just he himself truly believes Mobius is good for the world. He himself really wants the life of a Mobius, but he has to fight his friends because his friends are directly against the Mobius. All they needed to do was represent, hey, we have very opposite ideals, opposite visions for how this world should be, so we have to fight. That would have made it more tragic. You know, we're gonna have friends in the world where you come across something major that you guys just disagree on. Like, you just can't agree, but it's so major that it's important enough to you that maybe you aren't friends anymore. You're gonna come across that in life. And I felt like this situation would have been the perfect opportunity to represent that. I just felt like that was a way more interesting route they could have chosen. And so that when he finally sacrifices himself, you do feel bad for him, because it's like, okay, well, it's not like he ever was truly a dick towards us. It was just like the circumstances and just the reality of the world that we have to fight. I think it would have supported the overall sadness of the world, Ionios, having to fight, right? Even ignoring that, I don't think the way they did it was that well executed to begin with. Now, here's the thing. Here's a character that is very similar to Yorin in terms of why they want to be a Mobius, but I think it was executed way better, and that's Shania. I just could not believe that at the end of Senna's side story, I was shedding tears for Shania. I just could not believe that. I like the whole thing with her and Gondor and her dynamic with Senna, how Senna sees herself in Shania. But the main thing I want to highlight is the excellent portrayal of perspective. Because throughout the main story, if you just play the main story, you don't see that much as to why. You just know that she's very bitter about the world. But you do see a flashback with Gondor. You see a flashback where Gondor is like, why are you trying to be like me? Stop being like me. And it comes off very mean-spirited, right? But then you do the side story. You learn more about Shania's backstory. You learn more about just her family situation and how fucked up that is. Her absolute bitch of a mom. I don't care, I'll say it. You just learn all about that. But then that comes along with the second half of that same flashback, where you realize Gondor is saying, hey, what are you doing? Stop being like me. Because you should be like yourself, because your art, that's your true passion. That's your true talent. You should be focusing on that instead of trying to succeed the same ways that I do. It's supposed to be an uplifting message, right? Like, if you were to overhear that conversation, you would think, wow, you know, what a good friend trying to inspire them to be themselves. In fact, we see that, which I think was intentional. I love it. We see that with Mio and Senna. Senna orders the same food as Mio because Senna is unpopular and Mio is popular in the colony. So Senna's just trying to, like, fit in. And then Mio tells her, hey, look, you don't gotta be like me, just be yourself. It's a very similar conversation, which is why Senna finds herself in Shania. But with Shania's case, there's an important distinguishment. The fact that Gondor told her, hey, stop trying to be like me. It's not working. I think some people will look at that whole situation and they'll be like, oh, well, that's kind of convenient that they just left out the rest of the flashback until that side story. It's kind of convenient that she didn't remember it until before she died. But the reason why I point to that as a great portrayal of perspective is because if you're in Shania's shoes, what's most important to you is being good at that thing that Gondor is telling her to stop doing. In reality, it did more harm because due to the constant pressure she has from her mom, she feels like she really needs to be good at this thing. And if her friend is telling her, yeah, you're not good at this thing, then that's what's gonna... That's what she's gonna take away, right? That's what's gonna stick with her. Not the part where, hey, yeah, you just be yourself, do what you love. No, the part that's gonna stick with her is like, wow, yeah, I really do suck at this thing and I hate this. We can all relate to that, right? Just think about, like, when you see, like, if you're a content creator, you definitely feel this. You see, like, a bunch of positive comments, but then there's, like, that one comment that really sticks with you because maybe it insults you in a way that's, like, you're sensitive about, or maybe it's about something you really wanted to be good, but they thought it was bad. So it just sticks with you more than the positive comments, right? I think it's just like a natural human nature there. I'll give you another example, a more specific example. I'm guilty of this. I feel like many guys are guilty of this. It's like when a guy tells a girl, hey, you don't need to wear makeup. Stop obsessing over makeup. You can just be yourself. You look pretty naturally. It's kind of like that. We're like, it's well intended. Maybe people overhearing the conversation will think it's a good thing you're saying that, and hey, maybe that woman will also think it's good. But a lot of women will be annoyed because it's like, hey, I actually think this makeup thing is important to me. It makes me feel confident. I want it to look good on me. So the fact that you're kind of dismissing it, that's like just pissing me off. And that's understandable. Like, even though if something on the outside seems good, in that person's shoes, it could actually be more detrimental. And that's what happened to Shania. She had to be reminded by Gondor of that second half of that flashback. And it wasn't until she started reflecting more on, you know, that passion that she was able to, like, accept that as she died. Which is very, like, that whole side story is so... I've used the word sad and tragic a lot, but it really was. Like, that was such a sad side story. Especially afterwards, when her mom comes back to her grave, or her tombstone thing, and she's just, like, not showing any semblance of sympathy. Like, that was effed up, but, like, it was some good content. Very good content. Let us... Oh! I totally forgot. I have Ethel on here. She does not fit my category of main protagonist or main antagonist, but she's a character I put in here because I have thoughts about Ethel. To me, Ethel is, like, out of everybody on this tier list, Ethel is the one that gives me the most conflicting feelings. She's this very cool character, you know, from the get-go. You see her, she's awesome. Like, how could you not think she's awesome, right? Her design's great. It's like a match made in heaven when you first see her. But then she dies halfway in chapter 4. And when that happens, I wasn't really that sad. I was more just, like, shocked. Like, I just didn't see it coming. And it left me with conflicting feelings. Because on one hand, I'm like, man, you could have done so much more with her. You could have... I just feel like there was just so much to her that we didn't learn about yet, and this and that. Like, she just has so much potential as a character. But then on the other hand, I was like, oh, well, that's probably what they were going for. I'm supposed to feel this way. I'm supposed to feel like I actually just lost someone in my life in a way that's shocking. So what they did worked in that way. If that was their intention, it worked. But I don't know. Like, to me, I just think she's too cool to be treated like that. I guess I would put her alongside Minoth and Haze, because it's kind of a similar situation where, like, I just feel like there's potential that wasn't captured. I know this seems mean, but I don't know what I can... I'm gonna put Riku and Manana alongside the other Naupons in C tier. Here's the thing, I think Riku could have been in B tier, but a lot of the stuff about him is still ambiguous. Like, am I supposed to know who his master pawn is? Am I supposed to know why he had the sword? Am I supposed to know if he has this relationship with Melia because they, like, had this little moment when she came back? And there's even that one cutscene where Noah's like, Riku, you conveniently know a lot of things. And then Riku's just like, yeah. It's like kind of a tongue-in-cheek cutscene where the writers are like, yeah, I bet you think there's so much to Riku. And maybe there is. Maybe we'll find out more in the DLC. I think that's pretty likely. I think Riku's going to be a character, along with some questions about Noah, like what did Noah name his sword? I think those kind of questions are reserved for the DLC. But as it stands now, I just feel like I came out of it with more questions than answers with Riku. But even though I still like Riku, I think Riku does like assert himself and guides the group whenever they need it, and that's a good change of pace for Naupons. Manana, she's fun. Kind of the same feeling as the rest of these, honestly. Not much to say about her. She's fun. Cute. I'm gonna start with the girl with the gall. Senna. Senna's an A tier character for me. And I don't know this for sure. Well, I actually do kind of know it for sure. I think Senna, out of the party, especially compared to Mio and Eunie, probably isn't going to get as much love as I think they deserve. And a lot of that is like kind of similar to Morag, where it's like they're just a lot more subdued compared to the party members. Like, I don't know where I'm placing her yet, but like if you look at the other party members' backstories, we have the Yorin death affecting Lance. You have Nimue's death affecting Taion. You have Eunie, her own death, affecting herself. Miyabi affecting Mio. They all have backstories that are like kind of like intense and full of grief. But Senna's not like that. So Senna, her backstory and characterization is more like grounded. But that's why I like it. That's why, like, to me it's similar as to why this is gonna be random if you don't know me. It's similar to how I feel about Ignatz from Three Houses, where like they're surrounded by characters who have a lot more like crazy shit happening or just quirky personality traits. They themselves are a lot more grounded. Like, anybody can relate to Ignatz or Senna. But I think you need that character. You need that character who reminds you that, like, hey, this world is freaking crazy, but like we still deal with some of the same personal stuff that anyone deals with in real life. And I think that reflects in how she bonds with the other characters. She's often the character who shows the most like empathy. It's in an awkward way, because that's like part of her personality. She's socially awkward. She's not confident. She tries to be, but it's a facade. For example, when Mio kind of lashes out at Noah at this tower, and then the first thing Senna says to Noah is, "Do you think you're perfect, Noah?" And it's so weird, but again, it's just her she's like socially awkward and awkwardly blunt about what she's saying. The point is that she does like help the group in several ways. Another example is when Eunie sees the dead bodies in the city, and her hands start to tremble, and then Senna just simply like puts her hands on Eunie's. Like, Those kind of moments. That's the character, that's the role that she plays. But I think that's so striking, considering that herself is so, like, insecure, right? Like, even though she can, like, help the others out, she has a hard time, like, helping herself out, like, what her image of herself is. I just like that contrast, because I feel like it's very true for a lot of people in the world. A lot of people, even though they tend to help other people out, they don't really have themselves figured out. So I just like how relatable she is. I like how grounded she is. I like how she affects the other party members. Her friendship with Mio, one of my favorite things. But I also like, most of all, the fact that she feels different from any other party member. Because you can make comparisons, right? I compared Poppy and Zeke, right? You can compare, Nia with Melia. You can compare Shulk with Noah. You can compare Lance with, Reyn, right? You can make all these comparisons because there are just certain roles, certain dynamics of the party. The Napons you can definitely compare. Like, there's like certain types of characters they like to bring back. You can compare Ethel to Morag, but Senna to me feels fresh. She feels unique. Yes, she doesn't have much going on in terms of like the more intense and grieving stuff, but I feel like, again, you just need that character who feels just a lot more real, because that in turn makes the whole story and the characters surrounding her a lot more real. She's a character that, like, I just relate to personally. I think a lot of people can relate to her personally, but even just her effect to the overall game, it just makes it feel a lot more real, even if it's not in a way that's like obvious or in your face, but it's just a lot of little things that add up, and that's what I really appreciate about her. Lance, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't that much of a Lance fan. Not that I disliked him, but to me, for a long time, he just felt like the one that I clearly liked the least. Over time, I started to like him a lot. I'm putting him at the bottom of A tier. Is this over, by the way? Oh no, I can't believe this. Restart the compilation. I can't believe this. The compilation ended. That's so sad. Here's the thing, I don't have that much to say about Lance. I just think he's a very solid character. Lance and Senna's side stories are my favorite. The way that he imparts kind of what he learned from the juggling guy. I don't know, I just like the whole message of that side story. I liked the cutscenes of it too. The thing about Xenoblade 3's main 6 is that they really are like so well developed in terms of not just by themselves but each other. Like, you really do feel like they are a team, they are all friends, they all have a very distinct bond with each other. But I think I like Lance especially, because with Senna, they kind of relate to their whole, like, insecurities and the whole facade of being strong. With Taion, they're like homies, but they didn't want to be homies. I love it. With Eunie and Noah, it's like them just growing up. They just have so much chemistry together. It feels so palpable, so natural. So yeah, I think Lance deserves to be an A, but for me to be in the bottom ends, if I replayed the game fully, or just do more side quests, I'm sure that would increase. Then we're gonna go with Taion next. Taion. I'm gonna put him next to Senna. I said in my Xenoblade 3 review that these are my two favorite personally. Taion, when I first saw him revealed, I didn't really think much of him. But it just has a really great personality. Very strict, serious, by the book. But it's never in a way where, like, you're annoyed by him. And then you see that he's a lot more silly and, like, not immature in a bad way, but just, like, the certain moments, like when he's, do the thing with the baby during that beautiful scene where they all see a baby for the first time. The way he reacts to Eunie putting him as the fourth best friends. Just, like, there's moments here and there that really just, like, are so... They just endear you so much to Taion. And I just like his backstory, his whole thing with Izzard. Honestly, I think I would have put him lower than Morag, when I think about it. He's just a solid character. His side story, too, is a lot more, like, involving than I thought. Him seeing Nimue as a younger term, the way he all orchestrates that plan, just that whole side story is great. I don't know, even though he's on the lower end of A, I just think personally, to me, he resonated with me a lot. He has some of my favorite quotes in the game. The one that I included in the review is one of them. Okay, we're gonna go with Eunie. Eunie's not an S tier because I was disappointed with her side story. I thought it was just kind of a thing that happened. I thought it would be so much more interesting because you're going back to where her previous life was. There's so much you could do, but then you just kind of beat a Mobius and that's it. Now, granted, in that colony's side quests, maybe you do learn more. I haven't done them yet. See, that's the flaw. That's the disadvantage that Xenoblade 3 has. I just haven't done everything, and I haven't replayed it. So maybe there is more to Eunie in that backstory that I just don't know yet. The side quests in Xenoblade 3 are fantastic, so I wouldn't doubt that. But as it stands, I haven't experienced that. So to me, the side story was just disappointing, because you don't really learn that much about her past. You don't learn as much as you might think you would have, considering how impactful that was to her, just to feel that trauma. But she has to be an A tier, at the very least. I would put her maybe right here. Eunie is just so entertaining. She really is. That's the main reason why she's an A tier. She's just so entertaining. She does have her serious, more emotional moments, especially with Tyon. I like their bond a lot. Like a guaranteed fan favorite. She has so much dialogue that's good. Like, she has so much dialogue that is just straight up good. That's putting that in such a simple way, but it's true. She's honestly a pleasure to have around. One of those characters where I just don't see, I cannot fathom how you would ever dislike them. Alright, then we have Noah and Mio, the final two. Thank goodness. So Noah has a lot going for him, obviously, especially with the end stuff. He doesn't feel like a cliche protagonist. But at the same time, why he's not higher is that, like, I just think personality-wise, he's not, like, exciting. I love, just to get straight to the heart of the matter, I love that, just the beautiful poetic justice, the tragic poetic justice, that in order for the worlds to go apart, Noah has to separate from Mio. N and M's romance wasn't what started everything, but it's so sad that it has to end for things to go back to how they should be. That was such a beautiful way to end things. And just his bond with Mio is so strong. I think it's the best romance in Xenoblade history. I like how Noah has those contrasting qualities, as I was talking about a long time ago, where, like, he's like a very, like, stand-up guy, but he's also, like, he straight up says he wants to rip the world apart. He wants to find whoever is responsible for how the world is, and just, like, you know, I like that he has that determination, that vigilance right from the get-go. It's very passionate. You feel the passion from Noah immediately. And just the whole thing with the Offseer, I love that. The whole Offseer, one of my favorite things about Xenoblade 3, not just music-wise, not just cutscene-wise, but how it affects the characters in the world. Noah is obviously a large representation of that. Noah has one of my favorite moments in the game. I included it in the video, the review. It's out of context, but it's there. It's when Noah, he got the bloody knuckles, and, like, he's saying the thing about how he thought life could be like his music, always in his hands, controllable. But then, like, you just see him at his lowest, and it's just so sad. It's such a powerful scene in general, but that moment specifically, I love that. I love how Noah, I feel like this is similar to Rex at the beginning of Chapter 7. You see them at their lowest, but I feel like with Noah, you really feel it. You really feel just how low he has felt. And that just evokes more sympathy for him as a protagonist. You want to see him succeed. I just think he's just a great protagonist. Man, I feel like there's so much more I could say about Noah, but I don't want to say anymore because we gotta wrap this up. With Mio, the last character, and the final S-tier character. Everything you would want in a well-written character. She exemplifies that to the fullest. Just that core idea of her going to die. She is going to die in 3 months. Just that core idea. They really explored that to the fullest and beyond. And I love that. They didn't sugarcoat it by any means. There were some brutal conversations, some sad conversations, some existential conversations. It's all there. I really appreciate that. And the fact that she's not really like a one-note character. She has those contrasting qualities where like, she has that one scene with she lashes out at Noah, but like, she even says at the beginning, she doesn't really mind if she dies. But then that evolves. She develops. She learns to wanna live more. She learns to like, just like the rest of them, they learn to actually value their lives. Just a lot of things that, about the story that were excellent. I thought they were either a direct or indirect result from Mio. I just felt like she was just like the central piece of that story. She just has everything. Just like everybody else in that S tier. But I do think she's a top 3 character. I just think she was freaking amazing. Even her character design. She has my favorite character design out of all these characters. It's amazing. Now, if you've noticed, or if you haven't noticed, all of the main 6 party members from Xenoblade 3 got A tier or higher. And I truly believe that Xenoblade 3 has the most well-balanced cast. But Xenoblade 2 has the higher peaks. And in Xenoblade 1, I think it's just a showcase of, that was her first game, I don't think the character work in Xenoblade 1 was nearly as good as 2 and 3. Even though there are characters that are great, an A tier. Last thing I'll say, do not take the order within tiers to heart. The overall tier placement is what's most important here. Not necessarily the order within it. Except I will say I do think Mythra is the best. Like, I know I'm known as the Mythra lover, but it's not just because she's pretty. Alright? It's because I legitimately think she is so well written. My favorite characters tend to be because I think they are well written. Which is why you see my top 5. I love all those guys and girls. It's just one guy, actually. Let's go, Jin. Alright. Thanks for watching this very long tier list. We had a lot of characters to rank. I definitely did not need to say some of the things I needed to say to get my point across, but you know what? That's just the passion speaking. That's the love, that's the care, that's the affection. YouTube-wise, since I'm posting this to YouTube, you will see me whenever I damn well feel like. Sporadic uploads. More Xenoblade videos are coming, though, for sure. I have some more ideas. Alright, well, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it.